Okay, there's one other thing, and I find this incredible that we've missed this. Do you remember when I told you about December 12th when they signed that deal with Moderna? Okay, the government said we want to first make sure that no lawsuits can be had. Then we want to partner with Moderna to be able to make the vaccines. Now, they said that Moderna, they had this opportunity here, November 2015. That's when that contract was proposed. Okay, so that's fine. But then it wasn't until December 12th, 4 years later, that they actually signed the deal. Now, I've been through many high-level negotiations, but I've never seen anything that started 4 years before. Coincidentally, once they find the Frankenstein virus, and then they negotiate for 4 years, and what a coincidence, they sign it just before the breakout of COVID. That's weird, isn't it? Let me just go over this quickly, just so you can really understand it, the important parts. The people you need to know: Dr. Ralph Beck. I'm not assigning ill intent to anybody at this point. These people actually believe that they should check all animals for all viruses, and they should find a vaccine for all of them, so we'll always be prepared. Okay, I think that's insane, very dangerous, but then again, I've been to the movie theater before. So they actually believe this stuff. Dr. She, the Bat Lady, she and Beck and Peter Daszak all are in this through the entire thing. That is America and China through a corporation that is being funded by who other than Dr. Fauci's NIH. They did gain of function research. They paid for it. Fauci's people paid for it through EcoHealth. 2015, gain of function. There's lie number one. Then this strange, hey, let's partner with Moderna. I don't think this is normal. I'd like to know, did we cut a deal to where we own it, but we're not getting any money for it now that it's being sold? I mean, I kind of feel like if this would have been done with Trump, you'd kind of go, well, at least we're making money, huh? No. First of all, we shouldn't be making money on something that is this dire, right? We should be openly giving it to people. But it was paid for, all of this research, paid for by you. All of the research to create a Frankenstein monster, and then all the money to develop this. It was paid for by you. If we are getting paid, where's the money? Where's it going? My feeling is it's going to fund more of this. I said at the beginning of the show, COVID-19, biggest story in the history of the world. It has affected every aspect of our life. Public-private partnerships, coronavirus, Frankenstein monsters, a partnership with China. All of this stuff you can look at. When you start to go into here, it starts to get dirty, but you can at least say they were trying to do the right thing. Once you get into this, there's something was going on. Something was going on. And the fact that Moderna started the negotiations with the United States coincidentally the year we found the virus, and then they sign it coincidentally at the same time? I don't buy that. I just don't buy that. But the really disturbing part is the third chalkboard. I should remove Jesus and his mom because I don't think they belong there. The really disturbing part is how you've been lied to. Jason, let's start the day that China finally admits there is a problem. This is December 31st, 19, right?
Pandemic day.
Okay. These are the Beck emails obtained by a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act. You have a right to know. Now, here's what's really interesting. Many of these emails were redacted when they were set out because they had sensitive information in it. But there were sometimes 25 people on the CC list. What if you could take the Fauci emails and compare them to the emails from all the other people that were CC'd and see if they're redacted in the same place? And when they're not, piece together one full email. That's what researchers have done. And here's what we found. On December 31st, the official day of the pandemic, the first official day, Dr. Beck sends an email to his buddy, Peter Daszak, and he says, "Hey, have you heard any news on this?" Now, if I'm those guys and I've been working with Dr. Shi and it's in Wuhan and I know what we've been trying to do, you got to imagine how the news of an outbreak was being taken by these guys. Here we have an outbreak of a virus that is similar to the one they've been working on, popping up directly at the location where they've all been collaborating. I mean, I'd be a little freaked out. So Daszak responds to his people at EcoHealth that they are reaching out to, I love this, good sources in China. I wanted to put somebody up on the chalkboard, but I'm not sure who he thinks are good sources in China. So I mean, maybe it's not them, probably not, but who else are good sources? Fast forward 1 week, January 6th. Now it's time for Fauci's NIH to hit up Daszak. The subject line in this email is Wuhan pneumonia. And the purpose was to find out what Daszak's contacts in Wuhan, obviously Dr. Shi and the Wuhan lab, were saying. He responds with, quote, "Definitely focusing attention on this one, Eric. I spent New Year's Eve talking with our China contacts. I've got a lot more information, but it's all off the record." Wait a minute. Let's see if I can get my arms around this. So the guy who's been the front man or the middleman for the money between Fauci and the Wuhan labs, why is he corresponding with a Chinese contact, Dr. Shi? And why is it off the record in an official NIH email? We got a pandemic. Let's put it into context, shall we? Do you remember my outbreak chalkboard earlier in the show? Strange things were happening at the Wuhan lab as early as September. Athletes reported other strange things were going down in Wuhan at the World Military Games in October. Then they started to get sick. Official Chinese documents show the hospitalizations from the same month in October. Researchers at the Wuhan lab are getting sick and hospitalized in November. Now, I'm just spitballing here, but maybe that was some of the off-the-record information. Well, that and yeah, I mean, we've been working on this kind of virus in the Chinese lab, at the same place of the outbreak. Oh, and by the way, with U.S. money. But don't worry, the NIH owns the patent for the vaccine. Let's fast forward now, January 31st. At this point, we know that Dr. Beck was talking to Daszak. Daszak was talking to his sources in China. And he was looped in with off-the-record information that he was then transmitting to Fauci's NIH. So we have most of our main players in contact. They all know something and are worried. But on January 31st, Fauci sent this email to two colleagues, Jeremy Farrar and Christian Anderson. Now, this is when it gets really interesting. Anderson is a California virologist, and Farrar is the head of the Wellcome Trust with two L's. This is one of the largest private funders of medical research in the world. They have kind of an uncomfortable dark history with eugenics. Yeah. So the combination of Fauci controlling nearly $4 billion in grant funding through the government and Farrar through private funds, it's massive. We already know Fauci was funding the Wuhan lab. We also recently found out that he was funding experiments that killed puppies in a gruesome way. So what else was getting funded through government and private funds? Well, let's go back to the email, shall we? Fauci forwarded this article in an email. It's a medical research funder. That's where he sent it. And also to Anderson, the virologist. Mr. Anderson. The article mentions or references the work that all of our vaccine arms race players, Dr. Shi, Daszak, and Beck, all of them, and investigating the origin was the main topic of this article, and it clearly hit a nerve with Fauci. It set off a chain reaction with all of our players. Here's a quote from the Fauci email. "This just came out today. You may have seen it. If not, it's of interest to the current discussion." I'm curious, what discussion? Maybe the off-the-record conversations being held between Daszak and Fauci's NIH? Mr. Anderson responds, quote, "I should mention that after discussions earlier today, Eddie, Bob, Mike, and myself all find the genome inconsistent with expectations from evolutionary theory." What does that mean? That means this was lab made. Now, as you can see on the NIH website, the virus was sequenced 2 days prior. They all had an opportunity to analyze it, and the consensus was at that time that COVID-19 had been manipulated in a lab. Now, that's hard to measure the panic in an email, but that's basically what ensued. The very next day, February 1st, Fauci sent his deputy an email. Quote, "It is essential that we speak this AM. Keep your cell phone on. I have a conference call, likely be over at this time. Read this paper as well as the email that I will forward to you now. You will have tasks today that must be done." The email he forwarded was the same article that questioned COVID's origin, and that mentioned all of our players. Now take a look at the attachment that Fauci added to the email. Beck, Shi, et al., Nature Medicine, SARS, gain of function. The email's subject line was important. He wanted to keep his phone close and to get a read on what Beck and Shi had been doing since 2013, and I'll add, with the NIH funding through Daszak. Now take a look at the deputy's immediate response. Quote, "The paper you sent me says the experiments were performed before the gain of function pause, but have since been reviewed and approved by NIH. Not sure what that means, since Emily is sure that no coronavirus work has gone through the P3 framework. She'll try to determine if we have any distant ties to this work abroad." Panic. Sorry, let me play this for you one more time.
Senator Paul, with all due respect, you are entirely and completely incorrect that the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain of function research in the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Do they fund Dr. Beck?
We do not fund.
Do you fund Dr. Barrett's gain of function research?
Dr. Barrett does not do gain of function research.
Does not do gain of function research? Everybody was talking about it in 2015. Fauci was sending his deputy urgent emails with documents that had gain of function in the description. Now, how does he actually deny this to Rand Paul or anybody? They then scrambled to see if they had any, quote, ties to this work abroad. They have researchers just like I do, and I'm sure they're very capable. I hope they are. So surely they went to their grants and saw this like we did. I'm sure they went to their own website where Dr. Beck and Dr. Shi published their little Frankenstein coronavirus research. Check out the acknowledgments section. Quote, supported by grants from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. USAID EPT predict funding from EcoHealth Alliance. There was a lot more funding. And I could go on, but the evidence is clear. Did they have any ties to this work abroad? Dr. Shi is listed on the project. EcoHealth, working directly with her. U.S. taxpayer funds from the NIH go to EcoHealth. Then they go to Shi. Taxpayer funds are all over this. Of course, we reached out to Dr. Fauci. We want to be fair. The NIH, we reached out to them to get an on-the-record response for why they officially lifted the pause. But so far, we have not received a response. Panic. Fauci and Farrar, maybe the two largest grant funders for medical research, like Beck and Cheese, organized a meeting the very same day. They included some of the most influential virologists they could muster, including Christian Anderson. Now, this is important. 2 days prior, he said COVID looked like it was manipulated in a lab. Anderson was to give the meeting a summary, and Farrar was there to discuss the next steps. Now, I have to assume now that everybody in the meeting was very aware that Beck, Shi, EcoHealth Alliance, and U.S. government funding was all wrapped up into a nice little ball. They knew Beck and Shi had the tools to make a coronavirus more transmissible to humans. So what would those next steps include? Now, in a normal world, those steps would probably include coming clean about what really happened. And my theory is, if they actually would have said something right then, they'd have lumps to take. But it wouldn't have been a very big deal at the time. I mean, they take their lumps, full investigation on what really happened at the Wuhan lab, and we would have moved on, really, I think. Most of us would have been more receptive to what was going on if they would have handled it that way. But that's not what happened. Let me show you what they did do. Here's a letter that was issued just 2 days after Fauci's conference call on February 3rd by President Trump's science advisor, Kelvin Droegemeier. He says, I'm writing to ask the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine to rapidly examine information and identify data requirements that would help determine the origins of 2019 COVID. Sounds good so far, right? But listen to the conclusion. Specifically from an evolutionary structural standpoint. So he wants them to investigate and find out, but really concentrate on anything other than the lab. Every email leading up to this announcement seemed to suggest that gain-of-function research and that COVID was being manipulated in the lab was, if not the consensus, at least something to be seriously concerned with. But now we have Trump's science advisor mandating that all investigation should be focused on COVID being natural or evolutionary. First of all, how can all of these people claim to be scientists? They are being told what to investigate and what not to investigate, all the options and data. And second, there is no way President Trump was read in on this. So that leads me to believe that this is collusion between Fauci and the president's science advisor specifically to keep the president in the dark. Now, to be fair, we reached out to Drogemeyer and we asked him to clarify. He actually responded, so that's a point in his favor. He said that the wording specifically as pertaining to the virus being natural in no way limited the investigation to that, specifically. But I still find this highly suspect. In the last paragraph of his original letter, he restates that the investigation is needed to, quote, understand the evolutionary origins of COVID-19 and more effectively respond to both the outbreak and, check out this part, quote, any resulting misinformation. Now, I wonder what misinformation he's talking about, because all of this kicked off after an article mentioned gain-of-function research involving Beck, Xi, and Daszak with Fauci funding. The letter goes on, requesting a meeting of experts to start investigating. Now, we all know how the government goes. That meeting, what, happened 3 months later? No. Actually, all of these experts got together later that afternoon. I mean, it's almost like they had everybody ready and coordinated maybe during, that conference call February 1st, that panic. The meeting was run by the head of the National Academies of Science, Andrew Pope, the president's science advisor, Kelvin Drogemeyer, and guess who else? Anthony Fauci. Now, I hate to keep pointing this out, but just 2 days ago, Fauci was at the center of panic mode, sending out documents and articles that showed a clear money trail from gain-of-function researchers in the U.S. and China directly to Fauci's NIH. Now he's headlining a government emergency meeting just a couple of days later, not merely suggesting, but mandating an investigation to, quote, understand the evolutionary origins of COVID-19. So let's call this for what it is. This is what's called controlling the narrative, a narrative deemed too dangerous for people like Fauci and those at the top of the food chain that were on the verge of being outed. Now just think about what we were facing back in February 2020. All of this was going down. We're facing lockdowns, mandates, no idea how many people would die. The Democrats were making this issue their main campaign battle cry. They had to frame everything as a problem of Trump's making. There couldn't be any blame shifted anywhere else. It could not be China's fault. And sure the heck could not been enabled by a career bureaucrat and reckless scientist. Believe science. Don't question science. It had to be Trump's fault. And two of the three men directing this propaganda campaign, and make no mistake, as you will see, that's exactly what it is. They were supposed to be part of Trump's administration. Look at all of these facts. Is there any other way to describe it other than Fauci and the president's science advisor colluding behind the president's back, withholding information from him? Fauci has already been brought in front of Congress, and Rand Paul caught him in a bold-faced lie. Fauci will testify again, but it's probably time to bring in the former president's science advisor as well.